our 4 o'clock live. I'm very excited today. We have these amazing guests on our show. Lloyd Freeberg is going to be talking about sobriety law and journey letters. Really excited about that. Thank you all for being here. Lloyd, could you tell us how you got into this and what is the concept behind journey letters?
Sure, it's a little bit of a complicated story, probably about me and how I approached the practice of law and how I had to make a dramatic change based on the results. I came from the sports world. When I became a lawyer, all I was interested in was trials. I didn't really care about the people. They were pieces of a puzzle I had to solve. And I had some great luck until I had a client named Oscar. And Oscar had multiple prior convictions for DUI, and he had a pending DUI case with a .39 blood. The criminalists in those trials used to testify back in the day that if your blood alcohol was at or above .40, you're probably dead. And so I worked real hard on that case. When we walked up the steps into the courthouse, I actually said to myself, if I lose this case, I should be disbarred. Well, it turns out I didn't lose it. But what I lost was a client, Oscar, because I picked up the papers 6 days after his not guilty and found a headline that said, Oscar, without his last name, longtime Brea resident found dead on the streets in Brea, presumed caused acute alcohol poisoning. And it stuck with me about, shouldn't I have done more? But I was still so engrossed in the trials and being highly paid for them, I went ahead with that. Then a few days later, I get contacted by someone I'll identify by his nickname, which is Bill W. And those of you involved with AA know that Bill W. and Dr. Bob were two of the powerhouses that created Alcoholics Anonymous, most importantly the 12-step program, which has been phenomenal for my clients. But at the time I wasn't concerned with that, didn't care about any of that sort of thing. I was concerned about Bill W.'s case because he at 19 years of age was passed out behind the wheel of his car with a .24 blood alcohol. And in that case, a policeman from Fullerton drove by, saw him, parks in front, goes back, opens the door, he falls out. I bring a very intensely litigated search and seizure motion for unlawful search and seizure, and I win it, and he walks, and all I can think about is he's going to make more money for me. And 7 months later, it happened. I get a phone call from him. He's crying on the phone. He says, Mr. Freeberg, I'm in the Orange County Jail. I have another DUI. And all I could think about was a boat I had been looking at. I wanted a picture of that boat for my office. Well, I got the picture, and it hangs next to my chair to remind me my job as a lawyer is not to buy goodies and trinkets on someone's pain and misery. Because he went out and he said, the case is a lot worse, Mr. Freeberg. I said, how so? He said, they tell me I hit a 13-year-old kid on a bicycle and killed her. And that made me rethink my whole practice. Is this what I'm supposed to do? Is it all about me and my ego, my wallet? Shouldn't I be concerned about those people? Eventually, I changed my practice to what I call sobriety law. And I remember vividly, shortly after trying to do this work, never having been down that road, so being tough to lecture and talk to somebody about something I really wasn't that sharp at. I'm in chambers and a DA and a judge are grinding on me, saying, what are you going to do to stop this, Lloyd? What plan do you have to help him? Because if he doesn't get any help, he's going to kill somebody. Then we have a plan for him. It's called the California Department of Corrections. So I went back to my office and I agonized and thought, how can I deal with this? And the concept of a journey letter came about, and I'll act out for exactly what I do. It goes like this. You know, Joe, for me to do as good a job as I can to help you with your case, I need to know all about your life from your earliest recollections, ups, downs, successes, failures, strengths, and weaknesses. Now, how I learned that is you need to write me what I call a journey letter. And that journey letter, because everybody's life is complex, has to be at least 100 pages, single-spaced on both sides. Well, by the way, it has to be written in a number 2 pencil. I stumbled on this because the first ones I had to do were locked up. You can't have a computer and a typewriter and pens. You can only use a pencil, but what I find with these is in the letters as a person is writing. I was born in Minneapolis. It was chilly. I played sports. I worked on a farm, and I had a brother. And all of a sudden, the pencil goes. And my dad left when I was 7, and the pencil becomes a test for the therapist who you're going to meet shortly. When they get that letter, it identifies the driving issue. And I'm going to give you a head start on what I found from these letters. In all of these letters, men, women, regardless of age, culture, religious orientation, training, there is inside of them deep what I refer to as an emotional tumor. That tumor I found is as deadly as a medical tumor. It can take your relationships, your career, your health, your liberty, and in some cases your life away if it's not dealt with. And that emotional tumor in every one of my clients turns out to be a sense of abandonment by someone important in their lives. I try to tell my people when I first learned this that don't buy into what was said to you that basically they interpret as you're no good, you're a bad person, you're someone I don't want to be around with. That's on the person who left. That's their issue. Don't buy into it that you're bad and weak. But what I found is the next step with those letters has to be with a cognitive behavioral therapist. And the beautiful thing about it, the letters points out, it's blinking with that number 2 pencil. Here's the issue I need help with. And I've actually had therapists tell me those letters accelerate the process by at least a year, because most of it is getting the person to bring it out. But it comes out, and what's interesting to me, when you just talk to them prior to that letter, they'll do everything they can to not say what that issue is. But when they start writing the letter, it comes out in every single one of those letters. So the journey letter to me has been the gateway to helping people find out the driving issue in their behavior. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of my heroes here, and there are 2 different heroes. There's heroes who've been down a road and heroes who helps them get off that road. So Paul, I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your experience and your work with the journey letter and how it's affected you in your life.
Sure. My name is Paul Benjamin, and for me, growing up, I never quite fit in or felt that I didn't fit in, and there was always something missing. You know, some character defect I thought it was, and as my life progressed, I got into drugs and alcohol, which calmed that feeling and made me feel accepted and wanted, and I became life of the party or whatever, and it just eased my nerves. And as that road took hold of me, came consequences, and I ended up getting a lot of prison sentences. I got in 7 prison terms behind drugs and alcohol, and I basically started doing things that I wasn't really proud of. When I was introduced to the journey letter, I was sitting in the Orange County Jail, and I was looking at 17 years, and I had Lloyd Freeberg as my attorney, and he asked me to write down a journey letter of my life story so he could formulate a case in my defense. And at first, I didn't see how this letter was supposed to help me in any way. I was like, how is it going to help me by putting everything that I've done on a piece of paper so the whole world could see, And my wife kept urging me to do it, and so it took me a little bit going back and forth before I decided on actually doing it. And it took me about 6 months to write everything out. I wrote about 5 pages a day, just because it was so taxing of actually putting things down. I used it as a timeline. And when I was done with it, and I gave it to Lloyd, I actually sent it out in pieces because I didn't want the sheriffs to get a hold of it. It was confidential information, and it was very personal to me. And so when it was finally presented to Lloyd, I remember there was a period of time where I didn't hear from him because he was busy on other cases, and I remember thinking, I got insecure and feeling, ashamed of, what he might be thinking of me, or, I put all this out there, how come I haven't heard from him? And, but eventually he came to me and said, hey, I'm glad you finally did that, but I can't use any of that. I can't use any of that in your defense, but I'm glad you did that. And what came of it is I felt a sense of relief. I felt that I was freed of the bondage, because I was so resentful with myself and things that I've done, and to look at it all on the paper and to see what kind of person I had become. It was a person that I didn't want to be, and I wanted to change my life, minus the drugs and alcohol. I realized that drugs and alcohol were just a symptom. They were actually the solution to my problem. The problem was me and my ego, and what I had become, and that type of person. So I started changing it by little things, contrary action, like when you throw the trash, when you walk out of the bathroom and it misses the trash can, going back and picking it up, or just being polite to somebody, or watching my attitude when I'm driving down the road, what type of attitude I'm taking on, the demeanor that I come across as having, just shedding that old skin, I guess, and becoming something new. I'm not saying that I stayed sober from that time that I did the journey letter. It wasn't like that, but it was definitely a pivotal point in my life where I looked at it and saw, it was a timeline. I saw, like, when I was 12 or 13, and things that happened to me that I could look back and say that was probably the reason where my life took a drastic turn. And I was able to work with Lance while I was still in custody on those issues. Yeah, my life has gotten progressively better by contrary action, by me continuing to surrender to the process of healing. It was, you have to be willing, you have to surrender to the process and shed ego completely, or this thing doesn't really work. You have to be willing to, accept it.
Paul, frankly, in listening to you, that's why the word that comes to mind most often when I see and listen to is the word courage. Because what's in that letter was powerful stuff. And now to introduce the audience to Lance Dower, who is the LMFT who worked with you while you were in custody. And Lance, you have thoughts about Paul and some observations about what he said?
Yeah. Well, like he said, he wrote a very powerful journey letter, and he put everything out there. And that's what the hope is that a lot of our clients do. In my experience, jail is a great place to do therapy, which may sound odd, but it's hard to say, hey, my life is going great, my life is going well,
Right.
I'm in jail. So sometimes I even pause and take a look around and go, so what do we need to change this situation here? But the journey letter, like you said, Lloyd, is a jump start, and they're courageous. They're willing to put everything down. And I think jail, oddly, can be a great time to reflect. And once again, things aren't going well, here I am. And so there's a willingness to get everything down on paper. And from there, I'm able to take a look at that and explore those issues with the client. And they are more willing to talk about those things. And we get into deep things like child abuse, neglect, sexual trauma, things like that. And it's easier to get into, and they're more willing to talk about it because they've already taken the step to write it down. It's out there now. And so there's less resistance to actually dealing with it. And one of the things I've noticed too is that we kind of acknowledge that trauma leads to drug use. Bad things happen in a person's life. They find drugs or people associated with drugs. It takes those horrible feelings away, and then they get a legal charge, and it just takes off like wildfire there. Often the person I'm talking to, they know they have trauma, but they haven't really linked their drug use to the trauma. The drug use was fun. I was just having a good time, and then it stopped being fun, because withdrawal and things like that. But they never take the time to really go, wow, maybe it's for these reasons that I'm doing what I do, and I want to change that now. So it's definitely a great step towards recognizing the trauma and going, I want to do different now.
Absolutely. And Paul, what would you say to somebody in your position back then? When you were starting to go through this and really suffering with addiction and going in and out of prison, what would you say to somebody back there?
Don't give up, and know that there's hope, and that surrender to the process. And I think that AA is a huge thing, contribution in my life that helps me. It's a daily thing. You have to constantly strive for something better and something different, and don't give in to your temptations. No matter what, don't drink or don't use. Don't pick up for that day, or whatever gets you off gets your mind off of using at that moment. And just know that you have to forgive yourself. You know what I mean? We're no different from each other. We've all done pretty much similar things, and it's about being a better person, just being kind-hearted and gentle and surrendering, and just being at peace with yourself and the world.
Absolutely. And I heard that your letter was really long.
Correct. It was about 222 pages.
Did you have any idea when you started that it was going to be that long?
No, because I had a lot of stuff, a lot of baggage. I kind of knew it was going to be, it's going to take me a while, but I had no idea it was going to be that long.
And at the end, emotionally, how did that feel when you finally completed it?
It was draining. It was very taxing on my mind each day to do it. I remember, just feeling drained after I wrote only, like it would be five pages a day. You think, okay, I could write a letter to somebody and it could be 10 pages long, but when you're actually thinking back of things that has caused you pain, it's very taxing on the mind and the body to put it down on paper because you have to relive those feelings. Afterwards, I was anxious because I didn't want to be judged. I thought that, because I still had this image that I had to portray. And I felt like very vulnerable. I felt I let my guard down to another human being, and in a place that you really don't do that in jail or prison. You have that wall up, and you have that persona, and that's just how you carry it about yourself. So to become vulnerable in there to someone else it was very draining. Yeah.
There's another element to it, Paul, and we've been talking about this in the past. Doing it while you're locked up is difficult because if someone else sees it, it can cause problems.
Correct.
And the fact that you did it in piecemeal, but you got it all done. And you mentioned something when you were talking about you looked into the KDAC program.
Correct.
I'm still holding up, brother, that you do that because you're going to be the one that's going to help me with my case. It's not me. You've been down a road that'll help my clients get clean and sober better than I will. And talking with Lance was a great decision for you to make, so I'm real proud of where you are, pal, sitting here today.
Thank you.
And forget the 17 years that took a hike. I'd also like you to meet Derek. Derek is a younger guy, had his own issues. He's an athlete. He's had to go through a lot of introspection about things. He's done a really particularly good job, great journey letter. So Derek, tell us a little bit about you and your journey.
So for me, I'm Derek Riss. I've been trying to get sober for over 15 years and nothing worked. I've been to treatment centers across the country from New York, Texas, Salt Lake City, Seattle a few times, and down here a few times. But when I was presented with the idea of writing this journey letter, it was a game changer. It was a huge weight was lifted. And for a while, I didn't like therapy, but once I brought this into a therapist and I developed a really good relationship with that person, it like you said, it was like being with them for like already a year. So I have to say that the journey letter was a huge part of my recovery. What I've done, I have gone to a couple of different treatment centers, to the alum meetings, and I have presented the idea to a few people, and I've gotten nothing but good feedback from it. Also, at meetings I do, but not as often. So I really appreciate everything that the journey letter has done for me.
Was it tough writing that? Difficult for you to write that?
It was hard. I mean, there's definitely some dried up tears on some of those pages, because once I got to a certain point, like when I lost my mom and I lost my best friend within 6 months, about 12 years ago. So that was really difficult. And I never really like talking about that stuff because all I just get angry. And I lost my mom to alcoholism, cirrhosis to the liver, and my best friend at the time I lost to an overdose. So that was really hard on me, even to this day. But the grief has gotten a little better. I never will get over it, but it has gotten better. And for the longest time, I just self-medicated, and I really felt like that was the only solution. But for me, I am an athlete. I do play a lot of sports, and that's what I do now. And I encourage other people to find something they do for fun. Like in these treatment centers, like you go on these outings, and I think that can be some of the most important things for treatment centers to do, because you got these people are wondering like, how are we going to have fun again? And once you do that, and I found sports, and that helps me a lot. So yeah.
Derek, I need to tell you how proud I am of what you've done. You know, I've been through that system with you, and you worked so hard in that, and you've influenced a lot of other people. I'm not sure you're totally aware of that, but I know you've talked, because I've had feedback from people where you've talked to them saying, do the journey letter, work with a therapist. So you've done a great job. Of course, I want everyone to become a drug and alcohol counselor or a therapist like these guys, because they pull it off. Neil Summer and I have worked on so many cases together. Neil has had programs of his own. He's helped the court in deciding issues for their formation of drug court and DUI court. He's worked with so many of my clients. He has a different style. His reports, some reports are very sort of authoritative sounding and quoting a lot of cases and that sort of thing. His is more from the heart, talking about the client, so they've been received quite heavily by the courts in a very favorable way. So Neil, tell a little bit, you've heard some stories here from these guys. Tell a little bit about your thoughts as a therapist and what you're hearing.
Oh man, it's wonderful. I'm thinking back to 1989, and I was asked by a good friend and the dean of the Human Services Department at Cypress College to come and teach a class. Her name was Cindy Albrand. She's passed away, but she was unbelievable. And that was a long time ago. That was 31 years ago. I said, sure. I kind of flippant. Said, I'll do it. What's the title of the class? She said, it's called Shame and Addiction in the Family. Wow. I said, shame and addiction in the family. This sounds like fun. I think I'll take this one on, Shame and addiction in the family. So, I went and did a little research and put a few books together and figured I could walk in and, kind of do what I do when I'm doing educational lectures or group therapy or whatever. So I showed up at Cypress College. I remember it was raining, and I went upstairs to the classroom, and there were 45 seats available for the class. Everyone was full, but I couldn't get into the room because there were at least 50 to 60 people sitting in the hallway hoping that somebody would drop the class. And I went, all of a sudden, I'm scratching my head going, how much are they paying me to do this? And people were begging me, please let me in. I've got to take this class. And I'm thinking, they don't want to take the class for the credits. I mean, they probably want the credits. And this was, by the way, for the KDAC certificate. It was one of the requirements for that. But there were people there that had been sober for 20 years and people that had been sober since 10 o'clock that morning, I think, that wanted into that class. So I took all of my academic ideas about this class, threw them out the window, and said, we're gonna just go one class at a time. I gotta see what these guys want, because it dawned on me, they knew a whole lot more about this than I did 31 years ago. It was a phenomenal experience because it explains exactly what we're talking about today in terms of what the Journey Letter does, which is it not only allows, but it forces people with Lloyd's persuasive attorney-like skills to dig in and to begin to explore the importance of shame in a family. I'm a licensed family therapist, so my training has all been in systems, as has Lance's. It isn't, we'll see you next week and talk about your inner problems. It's the system, the family. So addiction grows in a family, just like a plant grows in a pot. And if the soil sucks, you're gonna get a bad plant. And that's what happens to a lot of people, is they come from a family that's abusive, that traumatizes, that shames, most importantly, that neglects. Because as you and I have talked several times, the issue of abandonment in people is critical, because what abandonment does is it tells the person being abandoned that they're not worth hanging around and being with. And so the issue of shame gets going. And then what I've learned as a therapist, and I've been doing this for quite a while, is that if we don't have tools to address the individual's relationship to those concepts, I know for a fact that the way that a person conducts their life is completely dependent on the reputation that they have with themselves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So one of the things I do as a cognitive behavioral therapist is I'll have people write down adjectives that describe them. Just write some, are you clean? Are you dirty? Are you smelly? Are you on time? And people write that, and then I put a little mosaic together and say, is this who you think you are? And they look at it and they go, yeah. And do you feel some obligation to live your life this way? Yeah. Do you think you could do it different? No, that's who I am. So what therapy does is it attempts to take what we find in the Journey Letter specifically, because Lloyd is absolutely right. It is 1 year of therapy, minimal. Because if you get your basic client that comes in, it takes a long time for them to get to trust you. It's more important that the person trusts themselves. And when I talked to Paul earlier, it was a phenomenal insight for me. He said, it's hard writing this stuff down because I feel like I'm ratting myself out. Out there on the streets, if you rat somebody out, you're going to get punished or killed. So I'm being asked by Lloyd Freeberg to rat myself out in a jail cell. What do I do? Break my own kneecaps? I mean, what am I going to do? And so the whole concept is foreign, but it is absolutely essential for a person to figure out what their reputation is with themselves at that point. You can't go anywhere until you can identify what point you're starting from. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Makes total sense.
yeah, but you can't get there if your reputation with yourself doesn't change. And just getting people off the hook legally just gives them another opportunity to run the streets, to get by on people, to hurt people before they hurt you, because you're leaving that legal situation with the same reputation that you went into it with. And this is the person that is dead a week later from alcohol poisoning. So if you don't address the shame, the neglect, the abandonment, if you don't, and the thing is, it's not like people are hiding it. They don't know it. They don't know it. They're unaware of it until they start writing. And like Lloyd said, you know, I was born of mixed parents, a man and a woman at a young age in Bemidji, Minnesota. And then all of a sudden, and then my father left me and I watched my mother being raped, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, our job becomes easy at that point. We go into sessions going, not what are we going to talk about, what are we not going to talk about? And it's like doing a triage a lot of the times with people, meaning we've got to take the most relevant issues and deal with those, and then work back to the lighter stuff. But anyway.
I wish
That's my
everybody
story.
would do this. I so admire what you created here with this sobriety law, and having clients be able to finally look at themselves. I know it's true for me in my recovery as well, and be able to see those underlying issues, be able to see the abandonment, the trauma, the neglect, the shame, you know, everything we don't see, and if we can't see it, we can't deal with it. So for you to be able to create this space for people to start down this path and become self-aware, it gives me goosebumps. So thank you so much.
These are all my heroes, everyone you've talked about, and I've got at least 300 who've written letters that
Wow.
are just
It's
amazing.
amazing.
But watching what these guys do, watching the courage of those people, they're the leaders of this movement, really, because I've been down that road. I depend on them. That's why I'm so pleased about their sobriety. But then to see the work that they do on helping reinforce that they're making a change, it still amazes me how many clients will say, I put it on paper and it's not killing me anymore. It was killing me to say it. I wanted to hide it. But now that it's out there, I'm ready to work on it, and that sort of thing. I want to talk about a couple of other people. We had a session together where I had Haley here. Haley got ill, called me and said, I'll come, but I'm not feeling well. And I just said, in this environment right now, I really suggest you stay home. But when Haley was here, she talked, and her journey letter was sort of the classic for a lot of women I represent. There was a sense of abandonment, but there's also a sense of sexual violations and physical abuse that she endured as a young person. She got very intense about that and worked with a strong therapist. She's now 3 years clean and sober, but I'll tell you, I would see her come into court. I knew she was under the influence, and she had 9 cases pending. And then subsequent to the jury letter and therapy, it was like almost that quickly she changed and realized who she really wanted to be and who she was capable of coming. So I'm sorry that she's not here, but I've got some pictures of another person. I'll describe it while the pictures are coming over here. This is an important one to me because it involves the police, and I want to sort of make a point about the role of the police officers. This is a client of mine who at 14 dropped out of high school, and his use of drugs and alcohol became constant. He ended up going to prison 3 different times. He picked up another case, and I still remember the judge saying to him, what are you going to do? And he tried to express himself, but then the letter came out. He worked with a therapist. He was like a completely different person. He changed dramatically. At 61 years of age, he decided he was done. And so he started into treatment. He got a 1.5 year sobriety. We went to court. We were in front of Judge Nicholas Thompson. And Judge Thompson kept looking at all the work that he's done and looking at him. And the DA is saying, he's been to prison 3 times, Your Honor. That's his home. Send him back. That's where he needs to go. And all of a sudden, Thompson looked at me and said, Bill, you're not going to prison, and you're not going to jail. I'm going to ask you to do a big favor. Freeberg says you're on what he calls the courageous road of recovery. I'm going to ask you to not only stay on that road, but while you're on it, please pick up a lot of passengers. And I tell you, I get emotional in telling you that line, because Bill straightened up his chest and said, I understand, Your Honor. Now, the second picture is extremely meaningful to me, because Bill had gotten his chip, and I happened to see the detective who arrested him in the audience. And Kenny Edgar's his name, and I went to him, and I didn't really know him. I said, Detective Edgar, we're having a celebration of Bill's sobriety date, and there were many people never thought he'd get one. I'd like to have you come to my office at noon. We're going to have a little cake ceremony, traditional, with an AA chip presentation. I'd sure like you to become, because frankly, you're one of the main reasons he got it, because he told me at the time of his arrest, you said to him, Bill, you're in your 70s, you're in your 60s. What are you going to do with your life? If you get into AA and learn that, you can change people's lives. You'll change your own, but you'll also change other people's lives. Well, the bottom line is, I asked the detective to come to my office, and he said, I'm not sure we can do it because we're preparing for a prelim over the lunch hour, but I'll do the best. 12:15, the door opens, and in walks the detective. He's gone and gotten a AA sobriety chip and presents it to my client. My client is now 68 years of age, clean and sober, went and got a KDAC certificate after dropping out of school as a freshman. And when I do those continuing legal education of the bar credits, he comes and speaks, and they just fall over him. So I had to present these pictures because in my work, the police are different than you may think. They want my clients clean and sober just as badly as I do. And I've got several photos of him and other police coming to my office giving chips to my clients, where at one time they're putting handcuffs on them.
I absolutely love that, and it just shows you that no one ever is a lost case or a lost cause. You know, there's always an opportunity, no matter where you're at in your life, to make a change, to start over, and to see that at 61 years old, that he was able to do that and had people support him and encourage him, and then go on to change other people's lives. It's absolutely beautiful.
Did I tell you about working his steps and talking to his mother?
No.
His mother was in his late 80s, and he decided it was time for him to go make his amends to her. And he went one night and he said, Mom, there's something I have to tell you. She said, what is it, son? Mom, I'm a drug addict. And she said, son, I love you so much. I've known that, but I'm so proud of what you're doing now. You're the son I've always loved and will love forever. She died 2 days later. And his attitude is, I was able to make my amends to my mother. Is there a better way to end this road? I don't think so. So he's now got a KDAC certificate in helping people, and he speaks at different presentations I put on. People love him. He's fabulous. How could you not love him for the strength at his age to deal with that issue? So these are some of my heroes. This story is not about me. I'm a player in this, but I'm not the main. These two guys over here, they're the future of this business at helping others learn from their life experiences, and they're committed to do that. Paul, I want you to get that KDAC. You're a natural. I listened to you speak here today. You're powerful. Derek, you're in the same boat. You're the guy who's got the physical talents, the athleticism and stuff. They're going to be people want to chat with you. I know you've got a lot of friends, so I'm counting on that. And of course, with you two guys, we wouldn't be here tonight. I'm so proud of how therapy works on what you guys have said, and this makes my day. And Jennifer, I do have to tell you, I'm so proud of what you've done. I saw that one show, and this is what we need to do to get the message to so many people, to have the story told. And frankly, I'd love to tell you, I've got a whole bunch of other people we could have presented. I'm glad we had these people here tonight. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. And this was just so thought-provoking and so authentic and so real, and what people need to hear. You know, real stories from different angles of the industry, with sobriety law to therapy to us as, you know, people journeying through our sobriety. It's absolutely amazing being able to sit here with you guys and share this time with you. So thank you for coming. Thank you everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Halloween weekend. Until next time, bye-bye.